Welcome to Encouragement for Living Life with Lockwood and Lockwood. The guys are here to encourage you in your attempt to live more confidently and successfully in our world. They are highly trained and experienced mental health professionals, but they are not your mental health professional. They are sharing encouragement through information and discussion. People are complex. Just because an idea helps one person doesn't mean it will help someone else. You need to consult with your own professional who will hopefully know what is best for you in your situation. Now, it's time for Lockwood and Lockwood.
All right, to start, the title of this podcast is Why is Unconditional Love Important? Or is it a cliche? Everybody talks about it, a lot of people talk about it, not everybody talks about it, but a lot of people talk about it. Is it really important? Now, people like me, and I'm assuming my colleague here, my son, believe unconditional love is important, at least developmentally. To build into people, human beings, a foundation of self-worth that can help them in many ways be more functional, happier, less stress, less anxiety, etc. Many things that we'll talk about today. All right, so the first part of this that I kind of throw out here is the foundation of unconditional love. Solid, good self-worth comes from a good foundation of unconditional love.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how is that formed? What does that look like? What is unconditional love? I use the example that's the son or daughter getting up in the morning, little boy, little girl, and they go into the kitchen to see mom or dad or both. And they're greeted with a smile, and they haven't done anything to perform. They haven't done nothing to earn love. They're there, and they're loved because they're there. And when there's enough interaction like that,
Mm-hmm.
a child can then begin to develop a foundation of unconditional love if it's not clouded or contradicted by a strong push that ties performance to love, which we'll also talk about then too. Because I believe there's many, many consequences of a good foundation of unconditional love. The first one I had was handling criticism. I believe you have good self-worth built into you by a foundation of unconditional love. You can handle criticism well. You can hear it, evaluate it, not overreact to it generally, and go, well, that sounds like that might be true. I might be doing that actually. Or I don't think I'm doing that. I'll keep my mind open to it, but I don't think that's how I'm dealing with things. And they're not reactive, and they can kind of step back and go, well, is it true or not? Because the criticism doesn't diminish significantly their sense of worth. It can affect it a little bit, but not significantly. Now, if somebody fires you and tells you you're horrible, that may affect it more. But if you still have a foundation of unconditional love, meaning solid good, healthy self-worth, you'll deal with it pretty darn well. You still won't like getting fired, but you'll know that their criticism is only part of the story, and even if it's accurate, you still know you have great worth and value. And you can build from that and more easily find another job and not take what your boss said personally, at least for a good amount of time, because some people they can just stick with them forever, and really haunt them. But when you have that kind of solid sense of self-worth from unconditional love, you handle things much better. What do you think?
There's a lot to say, I think, because there's a lot of words that you use that people will take for granted or have a very superficial relationship with. So you're using
All
the
right,
phrase,
flesh it out.
yeah, I mean, there's like three that I'm really stuck on so far.
Okay. Okay.
So the first is the word unconditional. I think that there's a common sense way people use that word, but I don't think that that's what you're technically describing.
Probably
That's my
not.
first one.
Yeah.
The second phrase is the phrase sense of self-worth, which is very different than the idea that there's this permanent, like, who you are and how valuable you are, right? So you're using the phrase sense of, which I'd like to highlight and come back to in a second. And then the third
Right.
thing is the word love.
Uh-huh.
So I want to start there because it's the easier one to at least flag a couple of objections to, and then people can do whatever they want with my slightly different perspective.
Go
So,
ahead. Go on.
love is a very complicated word in English and in the United States of America, etc. And
It's only
so,
4 letters, son.
yes, I understand. However, it has like so many different meanings. And so there's like the different Greek definitions of love, and there's the Hebrew definitions of love, and blah, 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 blah. And notwithstanding all those lectures, you can go hear from somebody else who cares about all that stuff.
Right.
I think I think there's a confusion that I'd just like to explain real quickly. I think
Okay.
some people perceive love as niceness, right? So even the example you gave is an example of niceness. I'm going to smile at you in the morning for no apparent reason other than it's like I'm having a reaction to seeing you, essentially, is what you described.
Right.
Now, now, that niceness can come from dozens of places inside of the person. It can be because they really like seeing their kid. It can be because they feel like they have to see their kid and be nice to them. It can be because of they feel like their kid is struggling, so I should smile at them to make them feel better. It could be so niceness is actually pathetic and stupid in my opinion because it doesn't speak to something more grounded or more deep, right? We can have these shallow experiences of being nice because we're having a reaction,
Well,
right?
hold on now, because you're getting into how you develop a foundation of unconditional love inside, which it isn't from one nice experience. It has to be from a pattern of experiences that make the child feel valued without having to perform for it.
Right. So I definitely agree with your definition, just so everyone who's listening understands. I'm not disagreeing with your basic template. Your template's good, which is there's a foundational sense, to use the word sense again, which I'll come back to, but
Right,
sense
right,
of I matter, right?
right,
That is contingent in early development and in the first 8 years of life or whatever on
right,
consistent environmental responses, parents, whatever, to internalize the like there's a data set that the little kids taking in over those 8 years. They're getting like in the Winnicott sense a good enough parent, right? There's like just
right,
enough, like better than 60% of the time the person shows you that you matter in some obvious, not fancy complicated ways, but simple obvious ways like
right.
you said, right? So people might confuse niceness with love, and I don't want that to be what people hear
Sure.
from a clinical perspective because
Right.
niceness is very, very shallow 90% of the time probably, and it's not built on something more deep or meaningful. So I would challenge the word love and talk about care. And the reason I would say care
Caring
as
for.
opposed to love is
Yeah.
because care is more of a behavioral term. It's a term that we
Good.
can
Good point.
that doesn't really involve all the different connotations of Greek love and Hebrew and all the you get rid of the definitional nonsense of all the pedantic scholarly stuff, and we could just stick to like what are observable behaviors that everybody can understand, right?
Right.
So that's objection number one. Objection or topic number two from what you were saying is sense of, right? So
Right.
I don't want people to take that for granted, that phrase, because a lot of people will blame themselves. I should have hugged my kid more. I should have whatever nonsense, in
Right.
my
Right.
opinion.
Right.
And the concept of sense of is completely subjective, just so everybody is clear. There is no objective sense of I matter. There's no way to objectively study that. That is just something that you, the unique individual with your personality style and your culture and all this stuff, that's something that only you can know and only you can have a relationship with. We can kind of tell from the outside, but it's kind of, you know what I mean?
Right. Right. Oh
So
yeah.
the phrase sense of is not just like a common way of talking about it. It's something you have to like react to like your other five senses, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
reaction to external stimuli. But that
Right.
reaction that the kid has is very much driven by who they are. Like we have a lot of attachment theory research that shows that your attachment style isn't even really about how the parent treats you. Like something like 60% of the variance in attachment is the kid's temperament. So how you're built from the womb is more predictive of your attachment style than how neglectful or loving your parents are, right? So that sense of self is not even 50% the parent's
Well,
responsibility.
slow down there. I would say that the attachment style, the temperament, many factors that make up the personality of even a young child, a parent has to be able to attune to that child for who they are. Otherwise, what you use word caring is not going to feel like you care about me.
Right. The problem with your statement, though, is it assumes that there's kind of a blank slate baby. And what I'm telling you is that there is no such thing as a blank slate baby. Like, you know how there's like the three temperaments, the fussy, the slow to warm up, and the natural, normal temperament baby, right? You learned about that in grad school, I'm sure. And
There's
that's still true.
personality style. There's actually a plethora of factors. We could probably list 20 off the top of our heads.
Right.
You know,
What I'm
so I'm not trying to. Well, you know me. I'm trying to keep things simple
right, me
for
too. I'm trying to,
people.
and what I'm trying to say in the simplest possible way is some people believe inaccurately that there's so much stuff they have to do from 0 to 8 for their kid to turn out well, when in reality, 50% of the equation, or maybe 60% or more, is actually how the kid's built, which you can do zero things about. If you've got a fussy temperament infant, that infant is not going to receive care like a normal infant. And there's nothing you can do. You can't rock them enough. You can't feed them enough because they're fussy. They're built differently. They were called colicky back in the day.
Well, the colicky infant, as a matter of fact, tremendous challenge. And it
Right.
definitely affects attachment when you have a colicky baby. But I'll guarantee you there's a wide range in how mothers and fathers respond to a colicky baby.
Right. And the
So,
reason I'm using the reason I'm using
as
this
an
example
example,
though, the reason I'm using this example is that colicky baby, there's a spectrum of colickiness, obviously,
of
but
course. Right.
even if you have the perfect patience with that kid, it's still not going to turn out the way you want them to turn out, is what I'm trying to say. Because that kid is built differently. Their central nervous system is not going to respond to your attempts at caring like any other kid. You can try your hardest, and there is no way that kid's going to turn out quote unquote normal. And I want people to understand that people can be built differently. And that's not your fault as a parent.
Well, yeah, well, parents can, you're right, they can blame themselves for things that are not about them, but I still put responsibility on parents to attune to who their child is. And in that, then you're still going to have a conduit, in other words, a relationship between the two that's going to help determine how they believe, what they believe about themselves and their worth and their value.
Sure, you could have a colicky baby, and if you're relatively attuned in the good enough sense of things, it will still internalize some sense that everything is okay, but they'll still be psychologically messed up. They're not going to be a normal kid. So, I just want to plant that flag that sense of is a very loaded phrase, even though it's like a throwaway phrase,
Well,
because that's
you're noting the great number of variables that go into someone developing into who they are.
and some of them you cannot
Yeah.
influence even with the best parenting,
So,
right?
well, I wouldn't go with a colicky baby. I think that that child can be, but now you talk about an autistic child, severely autistic child, you
Right.
have much less ability to impact that child. Although,
Yeah.
again, there's great variability in how well they respond based on how the parents do with them.
But even then, there's so little you can actually do. Same thing with a Down
Yeah,
syndrome kid or
right.
whatever it is, right? So like there are so many various reasons why parents blame themselves for outcomes they actually couldn't influence. So that's why sense of matters a great deal to me because that sense is
Yeah.
subjective to the person and how they're actually built, right? So that's that objection. I want everyone to hear very loud and clear that you have an important job as a parent, admittedly, and there are limits to what you can actually do, right?
Well, there's always going to be limits to what you can actually do.
Yeah, I don't
Sure,
want people to walk away
absolutely.
with this idea
Yeah,
because
yeah.
what you originally said, if it's there's no context and no flags around it, people will be like, "Well, I should have hugged them more, and that would have solved the problem." It's like, actually, in many cases, that would have done nothing, really. And that leads me to the third thing, right? So
Okay.
I flagged the concept of love, I flagged the concept of sense of, but then there's this word unconditional. So I think you and I, as clinicians, probably think about this in a slightly more nuanced way than just the way the people normally interpret the word unconditional. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have like a black and white version of the word unconditional in their head. Unconditional means no matter what, I will do my job like a good soldier, and I will be nice and kind and thoughtful and responsive and open and aware and perfect, right? There's like a perfectionism that people have around the word unconditional, I think, because kind of inherently in the definition, unconditional means across conditions. Doesn't matter what the condition is, right? So,
It can mean that to people, sure.
right. And so
Sure.
you and I think, mean something slightly different
We
by the
do.
concept of unconditional. So I think you and I don't mean perfect love. I don't
No.
think you and I mean responding with perfect caring behavior no matter what the circumstance. Because what that implies is that you never make a mistake, or you never do something that you don't want to do, or you're never conflicted and you act out of the worst part of yourself, or
Or
whatever it
that
is.
caring can mean discipline.
That's
Caring
that
can mean
niceness thing.
standing up to a child. All those things can be caring that people
Yeah.
in the world don't think is unconditional love. And I
That's
believe
that
it
niceness
is.
thing. That's
Yes,
exactly
that's
that
that
niceness
niceness
thing I
thing.
was talking about.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's
Right.
right.
So when we condone, when we remove the word love and replace the word care, and we just name some obvious behaviors of care, like setting boundaries is a way that you care about people. Saying
Right.
no is a way that you care about people.
Right.
Exploring is a way that you care about people. Being curious, right? So there's dozens of
Yeah.
obvious behaviors that we can
T-
say are caring.
teaching, helping,
Whatever.
um, yeah, standing up to all kinds of behaviors I consider loving the child. And when the child gets that I'm being loved no matter what, again, not a perfect sense, just a good enough sense,
Yeah.
then we can have the formation of a foundation where they know they have love, therefore, or caring, if you want to use the word caring, is fine, and they
Sure.
have great worth and value because they exist, not because they have performed for it. And
Yeah,
I'm
I
trying to,
think that
yeah,
that's the piece that I think didn't really, or that piece you just said is the part that I think genuinely is the part that a lot of people will not understand is super important, because that's what unconditional actually means.
yes,
Unconditional means not contingent upon their behavior,
correct.
right?
Yeah,
So
I
what
still
you're
love
talking,
you. A love you may be a spank. You're getting spanked. A love you may be you got to go, in your room and read a book. A love you can mean a lot of things. It's not like you said. It's not just a hug or a smile. It's those things that help a child feel like they're really cared about. That they will
yeah.
interpret that way because again, we need to go on their side. How is it taken in?
So to me, unconditional love is actually conditional in the way you're describing it, because it's conditional on principles. So whatever your principles are will dictate how you express care. It's not the person's behavior that dictates how you express care. It's your principles. It's your foundational understanding of what you believe is valuable and useful for the person, right?
Right, right.
And so it's that there's, to me, there's no such thing, controversial statement, there's no such thing as unconditional love. It's conditioned on one thing and one thing only, which is your principles.
Say more about that because on the surface that doesn't strike me the way we need to explain it to people.
Yeah, so like we're using the phrase unconditional love because that's a popular phrase that people say all the time and have said for hundreds of whatever years.
Long time, right,
Yeah.
right,
What I think you and I are trying to technically describe from the developmental psychology perspective is actually unconditional love from the developmental psych perspective is really conditional love. It's the conditions, the terms and conditions of the agreement, right? The conditions are I have these principles. These principles guide my behavior, not your behavior, right? So I value honesty. I value respect. I value whatever it is. And these are values that I want you to have. And so because these values matter. I think these values are adaptive for you and good for you. I will respond to your behavior based upon these values and how your behavior aligns with these values, not with how I feel, not with the circumstances, right? So there's one condition, which is your principles, right? So it's almost unconditional love, if that makes
Well,
sense.
well, for people listening, that's what I call a parent using love as a tool to help teach a child principles or values,
Mm-hmm.
okay, in the family. So this is where it gets a little more complicated, that I love you no matter what, no matter what, even if you're acting like a shit, even if you're not doing what you need to do, I still love you. But loving you means I'm going to help motivate you to do those things so you learn these principles that'll help you the rest of your life. See, so there, yes, there is some conditioning. That's the tricky part about this, that will a child internalize a sense of unconditional, what you call caring? So they have this foundation of worth, what I would call a healthy foundation of self-worth, a solid one, or so much going to be tied to performance. See, that's where the difference. You teach principles to children for their well-being. So that to me is love. That's loving the
Right,
child to do that.
right.
See, so, but I don't love you if you get A's, only if you get A's. I don't love you only if you live the way I think you should live. Okay, even though you might go against the principles you were taught, I'm still going to love you. I may disagree with your principles, but I'm still going to love you, and you're going to know that. When children know that, they have a good foundation of self worth that provides a lot of good things to them in their life and makes them resistant to a lot of bad things, too.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think
agree.
we should go over some of those with people. Like we
Yeah,
start out handling criticism.
yeah.
If you got a good foundation, you can handle criticism well. You can realistically evaluate yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, and less need to protect yourself, deny things. You can look at yourself realistically and still feel like you have worth. That's really important because a lot of people cannot look at themselves realistically or hear feedback that's negative without
Mm,
feeling devastated by it. And that to me is really unhealthy, hard for the person hearing the feedback. And they
yeah.
can't then benefit from the feedback because they're too busy putting themselves back together because they've fallen apart because they feel so bad from the criticism or the feedback, as the case may be. So that's really important. And they're less likely to be trapped, and this is the big one, be trapped in the perfectionistic trap, which means
Mm,
that I'm going to perform for worth. And if I can perform well, I will maintain a sense of worth.
mm,
But if I can't, if I fail, if I don't get, some people it has to be, they have to be perfect.
mm,
Literally in their mind, have to be perfect. Some people I got to be almost perfect, extremely good. And then I feel a sense of worth and I feel buoyant, I feel alive, I feel good. But when something goes wrong, and you and I know something's going to go wrong,
mm,
they're human beings, so they're
mm,
not going to be perfect,
mm,
which then means that they have a problem. They can
mm-hmm.
be very extremely devastated by a mistake, by criticism, feedback that's not all positive, etc.
Sure.
The bosses will listen to this and go, yeah, man, there's some employees I got to manage a lot emotionally because, boy, if I tell them anything that's negative, they're just going to crash. They're
Yep.
going to start crying and feel so upset and feel like the world's come to an end, which sucks for the bosses and it sucks for the
Mm,
employee both, to have that kind of performance based self worth.
yeah.
It's like that friend of mine, I might have mentioned this in a previous podcast, that told me about all these Ivy League kids that are going to therapy because they don't know who the hell they are because their whole life they've been performing for love, to be cared about. So they don't
Mm,
know who they are. They've just been performing to be cared about or loved.
mm,
So they're going, what clothes do I really like? What music do I really like? What do I really want to
mm,
do with my life?
mm,
You know, they really didn't know. They were like, they got to a point where it's like, I'm tired of performing.
mm,
So there's no core in them that says, hey, I want to go here to do this for me. It's like, no, I got to perform for them so they care about me. And that can be a humongous problem with many examples behind that. I know of a patient's relative who's drinking themselves to death right now
Mm,
because they were forced to retire from their job.
mm,
And when they took away the job, which gave them tremendous worth and value, they crashed. Even though
mm.
they were, up in their upper 70s, and most people think common sense. Well, oh, I'm glad to retire. No, they had to keep working to have a sense of worth and value. Took it
Yeah,
away, their drinking probably progressed a couple 100%,
yeah,
and they're drinking themselves now to death. That's an
yeah,
example of that. I'll
yeah.
give you another example. A patient got a new job, got a lot of positive feedback from the new job, inflated his sense of value and worth.
Mm,
And then he's telling me, I wish I could get up. I can get up now easy. It's easy to get up at 6 o'clock.
mm,
And I go, cool, And then he said, I wish I could do that on the weekend, which tells me that he's dependent on the feedback from the people he's now working with for his self worth or his value,
mm,
therefore his worth. But he has no core of it because on the weekends he doesn't have enough to get himself up. He feels bad again and doesn't want to get out of bed till 11 or 12 versus he'd
mm,
like to get up about 8:30.
mm.
you know See, that's another example of that, and I see a lot of that. So performance-based self-worth is, I think, it's a plague. And by the way, employers love people that have performance-based self-worth. You can often work them
Yeah,
to death. They perform at a high. If they're good at what they do, they have talent. Employers will use them, and they'll use them up. They make great employees if they have talent.
mm-hmm.
And that's the side that where they get rewarded for that greatly in the job, and raises and promotions and things like that, which can make it. We might say, well, what's wrong with that? Well,
Mm,
that's all good stuff to get promotions, but they often work too many hours. They
mm-hmm.
often feel too responsible for projects, way over responsible. They're often stressed out and anxious, and you don't know it because they're busy performing, unless occasionally
Mm.
it breaks through and they have a little breakdown of some kind.
That's right.
And at home, they're often having great difficulties because in a relationship, you're not going to be perfect. It's so harder to be perfect and please everybody in a relationships at home. Easier to do a task at work and do that. You can be good at architecture or
Yep.
nursing or whatever it might be that you're doing. But
Yep.
in personal relationships, there's going to be hurt and all kind of things that are going to tell you you're not perfect. So they have a hard time. Oftentimes they get greater anxiety, harder for them to relax, harder for them to know it's okay to take a break, take a vacation. People like that often can go years without taking vacations, and I'm not saying everybody can take vacations all the time, but they would have a hard time letting themselves relax and enjoy things,
Well, I
and,
would like
and
to
I see
say
a lot of this.
I feel very personally attacked right now because I haven't taken a vacation since I was forced to as a kid with you guys. So, but that's I think a
Oh,
slightly
well, you
different.
don't you don't want to you want to get into that. Miserable
It's
you were too.
it's a, but also yeah, I hated leaving my comfortable environment with my piano and stuff. So, a little more
No,
autism problem.
well, a few things there probably, but yeah, anyway,
But
but
also
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, but you
yeah,
you get it, and I know you've even worked on this too. You
yeah,
know what I'm
for
saying?
sure.
And yeah,
Yeah,
and to let yourself enjoy what you're doing and enjoy more and things like that.
yeah.
But let's go switch over now. Unless you have some comment about the good things about solid self worth. What are the consequences of conditional self worth? We talked about the trap of
Yeah.
performance for feeling cared or loved. What
Yeah.
are what are some other consequences of it too?
I think, the couple that you mentioned there are really good, right? So just to
Yeah.
reiterate what you said, you listed, excuse me, you listed difficulty with relaxing as let's call it a symptom of conditional self-worth. It
Right.
could be a symptom
Right.
of other things, but it's very commonly this perfectionism problem. Um,
Right.
Generally speaking, maladaptive perfectionism is a huge consequence of this developmental problem we're discussing. So there's different types of perfectionism, and especially
Right.
there's actually sports psychology literature on this that there's two types of perfectionism. There's socially derived perfectionism, where you're basing your your internal performance on the external world and how it responds to you, and there's internally derived perfectionism. So the folks that have internally high standards for themselves that are not contingent on the outside world's feedback, those are the people that crush it as quarterbacks and basketball players and business people that don't burn out. And so uh,
Right on. Right.
shout
Yeah.
out to shout out to
Yeah.
internally derived perfectionism. If you have high
Nice.
standards for yourself that
Right.
are not contingent upon what other people do. Now, I want to plant a flag here that like everything we do is for other people because at all times of the day and night, we are always with regard to other people. We are always in
In
relationship,
relationship. Yeah.
whether or not we're asleep, awake, at
For
work,
sure.
at home. So I don't want this to sound like just do everything for yourself because that's literally impossible. We live in a world full of people, so we're always contingent beings. We're always working with people. So it's not like we perfectly do things for ourselves. That's silly. However, when
Right.
our internal standards matter more than our external consequences, we're more well adjusted. It's that simple.
Amen. Amen.
So,
You bet.
another consequence of this like shame-based, perfectionism-based self-concept is you tend to have really, really unrealistic expectations about the world. It's a crystal clear
Ah.
consequence that the world should be reliable, for instance. When in reality, if development goes well, you will realize that it doesn't matter how screwed up the world is, I'm going to be okay, right? That's that good enough secure base thing from attachment theory, right? And so you could totally tell when someone has like an obsessive compulsive disorder or OCPD kind of perfectionism because they almost delusionally believe that the world should be reliable in a way that it is literally not capable of being. If
Well,
you've been on this,
yeah, I would tweak what you're saying just a pinch because security, to me, there's two things that help make up someone that functions pretty well in the world.
yeah,
Security's one, self-worth's the other. These are kind
sure,
of like core issues for people that I treat and
sure,
how I look at people in general. So you brought up a whole other area that we will address, security. But you
yeah,
can't talk about one without the other. That's why it came up. And
right,
you also added shame into the discussion, which is really important because that epitomizes the worst of self worth.
right,
It damages self worth tremendously,
right.
tremendously, which then puts you in even a greater bind than just fragile self worth or self worth not based on an unconditional or what you would call a principled sense of caring about a child that gives them a sense internally that they're loved no matter what or cared about no matter what.
Not to get too into the weeds on this particular topic, I think you and I
Yeah.
might disagree about this. I think that inherent in the problem you described at the beginning of this episode is, I think the only natural consequence, this is just my opinion, it's kind of like a self-psych thing. I think the natural consequence of not getting your needs met reliably, being cared for reliably, is shame. I don't think there's any other consequence. And so you damage healthy narcissism in early development.
Oh, not just shame,
Well, I mean,
insecurity.
well, the insecurity is superficial. It comes on top of the shame. The core problem
It's a
is,
ripple.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's a
so
ripple of
like
many things. Yeah,
so my view is like when development doesn't go super well, you you naturally have injuries, narcissistic injuries, whatever. You have these injuries that start to add shame, a sense of I am broken or something is defective about me. And that's a spectrum. So it could be at the 100th percentile or something, or it could be at the 50th percentile or the 10th percentile. It's
right.
a spectrum. But like
Varying degrees.
kind of the more injuries or the more damage or the more misattunements or whatever, the more shame you kind of have built into your self concept, right? So the more I
Right.
am bad, I am broken is a bigger piece of the pie chart, if that makes sense.
Amen. Yes,
And
absolutely. Yeah.
so for me, I think a lot of what we're talking about is what are the consequences of developmental shame, or what are the consequences of not learning to be behavioral about it, that you
Mm-hmm.
matter. And and the consequence is you see yourself as broken in some fundamental way, even if it's 1%. Because 1% of foundational shame can look like wild substance use, wild sexual behavior, wild relationship behavior, passive
I
aggression.
I wouldn't think about 1% doing that. I would think it'd have to be a pretty good hunk. You know,
Okay,
I see
you
people
and I
get
disagree.
tremendous shame. That's the first thing we really disagree on today. But
I love
yeah,
that.
if you got 99% where you feel a good foundation of feeling valued, cared about, I think you can deal with the shame.
Okay,
You know,
I think you
shame.
should. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Well, yeah, and but you're leading to the end point for this for people is what do you do
yep,
if you didn't have built into you that what I call unconditional sense of caring or what you call principled sense of being cared about, where
yeah,
you know that no matter what they care about you and they're gonna do what's best for you, which feels like caring.
yeah,
That you're cared about and builds in that solid foundation of healthy self worth. What do you do? And I was sitting there thinking when I was writing this out, well, some people are going to listen to us and go, oh shit, I've been performing for feeling cared about my whole life. And they'll start doing something about it right away from just listening to this. They'll start modifying their behavior because they're smart, they get it, and they know it's hurt them to be such a performance based person for their sense of worth and value.
right,
But there's other people, it's so woven into their personality it doesn't respond well to conscious awareness of the problem. And most people I see get the concept quickly. They
yeah,
understand quickly. It's like, oh yeah, I didn't feel that growing up, and I need to feel that. Some people it takes a lot for them to change that. So again, I go to the simple continuum. Depending on how inherently woven into you it is, you may be able to
mm-hmm,
change it just by cognitive awareness, reading some books, doing some workshops, just reflecting,
mm,
very low level stuff in my mind that'll help you have a different way of viewing yourself and the world and
mm,
what you expect from yourself and what you expect from the world. Will
mm,
free you up. But some people, it's a deeply woven in problem. Probably that
yeah,
higher percent people
yeah,
that than your 1%. I
yeah,
wish mine was 1%, son. Anyway, but no, I deal with some extreme shame, and I've had some extreme shame. Has dominated my life. And so, but for the people that are in that category, they may need to seek professional help.
yeah, yeah. I
Or
agree with
some
that breakdown.
combination of things that'll really help them really get in a belief system, enough of a belief system inside them that no, I no longer have to perform to feel cared about. I'm going to perform because it takes care of me, because it takes care of my family, because I can build a life by doing good things. But I'm not going to perform so you'll care about me and be a taskmaster to that old trap, because I call it a trap that keeps you stuck, keeps you anxious, not relaxed, easily volatile emotionally when things aren't going well. You set
Yeah,
high expectations, extra high expectations for the world. If
yep.
you got to be if you got to be perfect, guess who else has got to be perfect?
The
Other
world.
people around you, the
Yeah,
world. Yeah, and
yeah,
you'll be disappointed a lot too, which causes a lot of conflict and anxiety too.
yeah,
You know, so common sense says, hear us. If it helps you, great. If it doesn't, get some help. You know?
yeah. The other thing I'd like to add to this,
Yeah.
which is kind of like trying to sneak in something. So,
What are you trying to sneak in here, son, for people?
so I want to recommend the concept of play to people and or fun, whatever. And the
Okay.
reason I want to recommend this is, and it's part of my story too, is what I realized was the piece of me that had some shame that I didn't deal with the way that I needed to. Once I started to have more fun, like I started to put two and two together in my head about the things I was doing to have fun as a kid and the things I was doing as a college kid to have fun. And I started to realize, okay, there's a couple of important patterns across these different types of fun, whether it's working on cars or barbershop or whatever I was doing. And so once I realized what fun looked like for me because of how I'm built and the ways I'm different and stuff, I
Right.
realized that I could actually have more fun all day long, which
Right.
started to eliminate the performance-based piece of it and turn it into this really cool experiment I can do with myself, number one, because I'm that kind of guy. But number two, it turned into like, I don't really, in the Buddhist sense, I don't have to attach to anything, which is super cool, right? Like I can just kind of do whatever is the most fun thing in this moment. And that's for me. And it will naturally have the consequence of actually being good for other people, right? So if I learn how to joke around more, which is something I did back in the day, now everyone's life is better because the parts of me that are productive and successful or whatever are not going to magically disappear if I hone the skill of having more fun and being funnier. Those things will not magically run away in my life. So what will happen is I'll just balance things out. And the piece of me that likes to play, which is very important and part of mental health for everybody,
Right.
now gets to have the appropriate size space in my head. And the cool thing is, neurobiologically, you can't be anxious and ashamed and playing at the same time. Those circuits can't be alive at the same time in the brain. So
You
the more,
just, yeah, you gave a great example for people who want to try that. I think that's something good to try that will help them deal with their perfectionism,
yep,
in this performance-based trap.
yeah,
So if they can do that, fun as a way to stay in the moment, the Buddhist, again, thing I won't criticize. Buddhist saying, let them try it. If it helps, great.
yeah,
There's many things like that. There may be more, and you may find them, what you said, in books. You may
yeah,
find things that give you relief from this
yeah,
trap.
yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of ways to skin a cat.
Indeed, there are.
Well, then again, should I have used that analogy?
They're fine.
Oh, goodness. Anyway, that's some thoughts for you today on what I call unconditional love, and the foundation of self worth that needs to be built into people, or at least people need to cope with it better so that they can feel more relaxed, enjoy life more, not be
Yeah,
anxious, depressed, etc., etc. So once again, many resources out there for you to try, but if they don't work, try getting some professional help. You
yeah,
never
maybe.
know. It might
Yeah,
help.
yeah.
Okay. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for listening to Encouragement for Living Life. We hope you were encouraged by today's discussion. If you have a question, you can email us at lockwoodwithlockwood@gmail.com. We'll do our best to answer it on one of our shows. Hope to see you next time.